In a debate, it is not so much what you say that matters, but how you say it. You may think, like most people, that there are good arguments and bad arguments, but sometimes the conversational twists that you are using can completely shut the person's brain down by using certain psychological loopholes without them knowing. Hi, my name is Matteo, and in this video we are going to study 3 different examples where a pattern interrupt happens during a debate, going from the easiest type that you can use every day to the more advanced ones that only a few people tend to use into an actual conversation.
You create a company that's like close to being a fascist, and then like...
Okay. How am I...
Sorry.
Let's go through this. How am I a fascist?
Dude, like you...
Can you name one thing I believe that's fascist?
You believe that, like, you are... Oh, shit.
You don't know what you're talking about, do you?
Don't boo, let him think.
But
I'm such a bad fascist, I let the people who disagree in open mic to talk to me for 2 hours uninterrupted.
Okay.
I'm an awful fascist.
So we are going to use the magical linguistics model that you may have seen before if you have been watching my channel before. As I was explaining previously, the pattern interrupt case is down below here because there are certain strategies and techniques to create an interruption in the brain of the person you're talking to. But at the same time, any of those categories, any of those squares any of those directions to lead the mind can create a pattern interrupt by themselves. It is much more about how well do you know and understand the logic of the person you are interacting with. This was obviously the least elaborate of all the examples we are going to see here, but it is also something to not dismiss, because I see many people underestimating how valuable that is. It is to call out for specifics. Many times, really many times, when people attack you on something, just calling out for the facts, the specific facts, will be enough to make them contradict themselves or point out the logical fallacies, their lack of evidence for what they claim to be true. So in this example, we simply have the belief enunciated by the college student saying that your company or you are a fascist because of what you preach, because of what you do, and the simple pattern interrupt here happens by asking, challenging, can you just name one thing that I believe that is fascist? Apparently no answer, at least he's trying to find something, but it doesn't come right away to his brain, maybe just because he was nervous, it is possible. Nonetheless, in that context specifically, he's losing the debate from the get-go because he can't even mention simple facts. So at its most fundamental levels, a pattern interrupt will happen barely through asking for evidence. That may seem overly simplistic, but how many people don't know shit about what they are talking about? They don't know any of their facts, any kind of evidence. They just rehearse like a parrot what somebody else said or what they kept scrolling on social media without verifying anything. And I'm talking right here about like 80% of the population anyway, including people around you right now. So it is not something to underestimate because it is more valuable than you may think.
What is justice?
I mean, that's a philosophical debate.
Well, but you're appealing to it.
Yeah, I would say that justice is at its very like...
So then, okay, what is justice?
You know, honestly, I don't think I have a good definition for justice in the... I'm curious what your definition of justice is.
However, therefore, it is mostly for people who don't actually know what they're talking about. When you talk with somebody who knows what they're talking about, it is more complicated, obviously, and that is what we are going to see next.
What's frightening to me is that you're equating some minor inconveniences in your privileged life to
why would you assume my life is privileged?
Unsupported,
but why would you assume my life is privileged, though? You don't know my life. I mean, I don't say that about you. Why would you assume my life is privileged?
I'm privileged.
Okay, that's fine, but why would you assume my life is privileged?
For one, you're a man.
You know, most people commit suicide are men. Most people who work in dangerous workplaces are men. Most people who fight in war are men.
And who set that system up?
Men.
So in this example, she's starting to make a surface claim about the fact that this guy she's interacting with is privileged, which might or might not be true. He is not accepting that statement about himself, so he's challenging that. So far, yes, if you disagree with somebody, with something somebody says about you, interact, interject, and say and ask for evidence. Good point. Then she is saying, well, specifically because you are a man, between other things, but that alone is kind of revealing her agenda. She basically hates men, like some of those modern feminists, not all of them obviously, but some of them actually hate men and they don't look for equality anymore. They actually look for matriarchy and trying to put men down because they have been oppressing everyone. That is a belief, okay? That is something we can compose with. In that case, he made, I think, a mistake here because he tried right away to give an alternative view by saying, well, actually, men commit more suicide and they go to war. So he's giving like counter examples and counter facts, putting himself in the defender position, trying to prove her wrong, but being in kind of the victim position based on her argument so far. A better strategy, in my opinion, would have been to call out for evidence for her belief. Men are the problem. Sure, how do you know that? And starting from there, for sure she would have had examples. However, asking for evidence would have been maintaining him in the leading position instead of reacting like the victim in that interaction. Since he did not do that and since he reacted to her claim, to her belief that men are the problem, she is going one step further very easily by adopting the meta frame. And when somebody is adopting the meta frame, it is very tough to get out of it. And the only way I see maintaining the conversation if somebody gets you stuck in the meta frame is to stay within the meta frame and not try to counter-example, counter-facts, because you have already lost at this point. So she is saying who set that system up, implying again that men are the problem about everything, they should be responsible because they are the problem. Sure, in that instance, well, she has been objectively a better communicator than he was in that example alone because he hasn't been able to react. Maybe it caught him off guard. Maybe at some point he would have had an answer if he had time to calculate. At this specific point, though, he kind of mumbled. Doesn't matter you're right or you're wrong. When you start to mumble and get overreact, from the people watching you, you're losing the argument. Even if you have better logic, even if you have better points, you starting to shake and mumble, you are losing in the eyes of people watching you anyway. In that example, I actually wondered, well, how could I have replied if I had been challenged on this? That every problem of society is because of men, because it is men who have made up the system. The first thing that came to my mind when I pondered on what could I have answered to this was the word system, which is a broad, very vague nominalization, and we can challenge this very easily. What do you call a system specifically? Because if we take the whole human system and that the whole human system right now is built by men, well, we can also point out to very positive innovations that happened because of men, therefore, if it is the belief at hand here. Like medical innovations in many cases, scientific innovations that caused a lot of progress in society. So that would have been an easy argument to reframe. However, it is easy to reframe if you stay within the higher frame and don't try to reactively defend yourself with counter facts, counter arguments like he did right here. I guess it is a matter of staying a bit more calm and listening more carefully before reacting to anyone. Finally, in this last example, we are going to see a more elaborate one because it is between two individuals this time who are more calm, who are much more educated, and who have better arguments. And it is about capitalism versus communism on a debate that happened on the channel Jubilee. And the prompt that was being given at that moment was, giving people government aid makes them lazy. Very interesting topic. Let's see what they say about that.
There are cases where I think people are incentivized to work less hard in order to keep their income under a certain level so they can collect a certain amount of government money, which in that specific case, then yes, I guess it does incentivize laziness. But also, if you look at government programs like Medicare and Medicaid, they're some of the most highly approved of programs in the country. And when you make a welfare program universal, when you make it so it applies to everybody, it basically becomes politically invincible because nobody is going to argue for their grandma's health care to be taken away. And we have a problem in this country where 45,000 people are dying every single year because they don't have access to basic health insurance. And I think if we were to nip that in the bud and nationalize those giant pharmaceutical companies and make sure that healthcare is provided to everyone, we would actually stimulate a lot of innovation, a lot of labor, and a lot of hard work in this country, because people would be less bogged down by medical bills and would be more healthy in general.
So without a market, if the pharmaceutical industry specifically is nationalized, how does the state set prices effectively?
He has been caught off guard here. He was interrupted mentally, at least. Basically, if we just sum up all the things that were said in that example, the argument here, or the statement, was that the government still has finite resources financially. Even if we give everything for free, that may work, but that won't work forever. At some point, as long as money is ruling the environment, we do need to get money from somewhere. If it is not from the supply and demand that capitalism is preaching for or using, it will have to be through the taxes or diminishing other important budget allocations, and will make suffer other critical services in the country eventually. The other side of the argument from the communist guy would be that we do see examples in other countries of collaboration, or at least a better collaboration between the state and the stakeholders. So none of those arguments are completely wrong or completely true. There is a bit of good and bad in both. However, again, it is not really about who's right, who's wrong. It is about how well can you point out to the fallacies of the argument of the person you are interacting with. So when the communist here is explaining that, in his opinion, better medical care could lead to increased labor by relieving people from burdens and they could be more productive, the capitalist, is pointing to a resulting outcome, so calling out to a future consequence related with the claim the person is currently saying right now, asking for, yeah, sure, but how does the government can set prices then? If we don't want to listen to supply and demand, and if we just want to get money from magical government box, that's cool, but at some point that box will be empty, and we will have to get money from other sources at some point. So if we don't listen to supply and demand, that is fucked. And if we do listen to supply and demand, if we provide everything for free, then how does the government sets prices and measures what is really more relevant and less relevant among the medical aids that are being given? That is shutting down his brain for whatever reason. Maybe he was not prepared for this specifically. Maybe he had a monologue in his head that he wanted to go further, but he was not prepared for that interruption. In any case, he's trying to gather up his thoughts again, and that is putting him maybe not in the loser position because he's very educated, but it is putting him in a less dominant position, at least in this specific example. The resulting outcome is something we all use every day when we want to point out the negative consequences somebody's choices will create in the future, and we tend to use that spontaneously when we try to convince somebody to not do something stupid in our daily lives. It is used very often in movies also when somebody is trying to give advice to a friend, saying, if you don't do this, you will regret it for the rest of your life. But is appealing to the resulting outcome. All of those strategies can always lead to an interruption, or can lead to the person opening their mind to more positive choices. Up to you, depending on what is your agenda and your desires with the context and the conversation at hand. If you want to better elaborate on how your language tactics can be used more powerfully, either during a debate or during any kind of interaction, you can also download the document down below called The 7 Steps to Master Sleight of Mouth, which is kind of a recap of the best strategies you can use every day in your daily conversations to persuade somebody, to avoid being in the victim position when somebody is trying to hold the frame against or above you, and how can you maintain the frame therefore while remaining calm without getting emotional, and while being able to point out the logical fallacies or the misunderstandings of the person of anyone who might be trying to attack you. That is down below in the description box. You can download that right away and start reading it today, and even better if you start applying it as of today. In any case, thank you for watching. You can subscribe if you like, and see you soon in the next video.